It's time to switch things up a bit with DraftKings contributors Garion Thorne, Matt Meiselman, and Nick Friar. We are ready for a little MLB price check. All right, let's start with a pitcher over 8K. Who you like tonight, Garion?
Yeah, there's not a ton of options on this 6:40 p.m. Eastern slate. Obviously, just 5 games, and also there's some serious concern about whether or not Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is even going to get played. They're expecting pretty much rain the entire night in Philadelphia, so Aaron Nola kind of seems like he might have been in a nice spot at a pretty cheap price tag for Aaron Nola, but I have my concerns that game actually gets going. So I think in that scenario, you're sort of left with Luis Castillo as being the best play on the slate. He's $8,900. He's been fantastic across his last 14 starts. He's got a 3.03 ERA, a 3.23 xFIP, and a 27% strikeout rate within that span of time. He's also coming off arguably his best start of the season against the Dodgers. Went 6 2/3 scoreless, 34.1 DraftKings points in that game. I don't know. Ownership might be high, although I think Lance McCullers is also going to carry quite a bit of ownership tonight, so I wouldn't worry about that too much on what basically is going to become a 4-game slate. Washington has also been a pretty good offensive team, despite trading almost anyone they possibly could at the deadline. But I think out of necessity, Castillo is a really good option tonight.
Yeah, Matt, 5 games, 5 pitchers over 8K on the main slate. Are you going with a guy in that slate?
Yeah, Aaron Nola, if he starts, is clearly my favorite option. I think this game does play, although like Arian said, there is a chance that it doesn't. And in that case, we will get very concentrated ownership on both Luis Castillo and Lance McCullers Jr. So it's really 2 separate scenarios. If Nola is pitching, I think you just go with Nola, even though he will be the most popular. His price at $8,500 for a home start against the Pirates is just far too low. I think he should be the most expensive pitcher on the slate by a significant margin. So if he's pitching, I think you just go with him and try to just get contrarian elsewhere. If there's no Aaron Nola, though, like we could see Castillo and McCullers 80% owned each or something crazy like that, because Nola's ownership is probably going to be that by himself, and it gets just divided up amongst everyone else, but primarily Castillo and McCullers, who are priced up in his range. So if Nola's not pitching, I don't really know what I want to do here, because everyone on the slate is going to be playing the same 2 pitchers. But if Aaron Nola is out there, I think he's the guy to go to.
All right, Nick, which pitcher over 8K are you vibing with?
Well, I know Steven Matz and Alex Cobb haven't got mentioned at all, but I think there's a reason with Cobb when he's going up against Houston tonight, as much as he's done well recently. And then when you look at Steven Matz, I know he did well against Minnesota last time. I can't really figure out how to gauge him. I would normally agree with the guys on Luis Castillo, but every time I've backed him this season, I feel like he's burned me. So I'm not going to back him tonight, which maybe is the reason you should back him. And then in the end, with Nola and the weather issues, it kind of leaves me with just one choice. And I know he's the highest price guy, and I don't usually like to do this, but Lance McCullers is the guy. And when you look at how the Angels have done this month against right-handed pitching, they're bottom 3 in OPS, ISO, WOBA, WRC+, bottom 3 in all of those categories. I know they're at home, and they've been a little bit worse. I know it's a smaller sample size. They're a little bit worse there, too, so that does help in some capacity. And then when you look at the Angels, too, and their K rate against right-handed pitchers this month, they're 7th. So, and then McCullers has done well against them every single time. So I think you got to differentiate with the cheaper pitchers tonight, and then of course the hitters.
All right, how about a pitcher under 8K, Matt? More options here.
So the game that I like for these cheaper pitchers, and it's especially true if there's no Aaron Nola. So basically what I think could happen is that if Aaron Nola is not pitching, you get Castillo, McCullers, and then a lot of lineups that have a lot of Orioles and Rangers hitters, because those are the cheap ones, and you're going to need the savings to fit in those expensive pitchers. Even if Nola's pitching tonight, that might be the case. So I think getting your leverage there and playing Glenn Otto or Zach Lowther is kind of the way to go. Both of them, I think, are pretty substantially underpriced. Baltimore, throughout most of the season, is a strong hitter's park, but a lot of that has to do with how warm and humid it is in Baltimore through the middle point of the season. And that's not the case anymore into late September. We're looking at temperatures that are going to be in the 60s tonight and probably even lower than that going forward. So I don't think it's that big of a deal to be pitching there. These lineups obviously aren't good. So I think either of those guys is fine. I'll go with Otto. I think he's the better pitcher of the 2 at 6,700, but I think there's a strong case for both of them tonight.
Nick, a pitcher under 8K, who you going with?
I'm actually in lockstep with Matt on this one, as Glenn Otto is going to be the guy. And I know he's gotten rocked his last 2 starts, but this is a guy who's not a fly ball pitcher. I think he gave his first MLB home run. It was his last start that he did that. He's only given up one inning. And again, I know the start before that he still didn't do well, but we're not worried about fly balls with this guy necessarily at Camden Yards. And then when you look at the Orioles too, like I know they've been like decent. They're better at home against right-handed pitchers than on the road, but they're still not like they're middling at best against right-handed pitching. But when you look at their K rate, there is strikeout upside for Otto tonight. They have the 4th highest K rate against right-handed pitching this month.
All right, Garion, which pitcher under 8K are you going with?
Yeah, round to Glenn Otto's. This is someone who has actually scored negative 12.2 DraftKings points in his last 2 starts. So even with limited options on the slate, I could see people just being afraid of someone who has been shellacked his last 2 starts. But as these guys were saying, you might have some leverage here just based purely on the fact that people are going to be stacking the Orioles tonight out of necessity. And Baltimore really can't hit right-handed pitching. That's been the case all season long. They are basically near the bottom of baseball in every single statistical category against righties. And also Otto, while he has been bad in those last 2 starts, as Nick was sort of alluding to, it's not like he's been giving up a ton of home runs. It's just that he's got a 560 opponent BABIP across these 2 starts. For the season, this is only 4 starts, but he still has a 3.10 FIP, and he's striking out 10.5 batters per 9 innings. So in a vacuum, those 2 numbers are actually really, really nice for a pitcher who's just $6,700. So I think Otto has some actual upside, and I think the Orioles just can't hit. So he's in a pretty nice spot.
All right, on the other side, Nick, talk to me about a bat over 4K.
Yeah, I know Michael Pineda is one of those cheaper option pitchers tonight, but this is a guy who I generally don't want to go him back, and I know he did pretty well against the Blue Jays last time out. The only guy that took him deep was Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and I'm not going to go with Vladdy tonight. I'm actually going to go with George Springer at 4.9K, and yes, it's because the batter versus pitcher numbers. 10 for 25 career against Pineda. I know it's a small sample size, but again, we're seeing 3 home runs and 3 doubles in that span, and I know Springer hasn't done well against right-handed pitching this month, but this is definitely an opportunity for him to have a get-right game because he was mashing right-handed pitching whenever he was playing this season before this month. And again, like Pineda, he just saw the Blue Jays last time out, so I don't necessarily feel comfortable with a guy who did well against a team that hits right-handed pitching well to go and have him replicate that kind of outing back-to-back starts.
All right, Garion, where are you going?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Jorge Polanco at $5,000. Nice piece on a slate like this because he has dual position eligibility. You can fit him in at second or at shortstop, depending where you're finding some value. He's pretty much been hitting any single type of pitching he's faced since the beginning of June, but I think it's important to note that since the start of August, he has a 170 WRC plus and a 1.013 OPS as a right-handed batter against left-handed pitching. Steven Matz has not pitched well his past 2 starts, and this Blue Jays bullpen is also very tired after 2 short outings by their starters the past 2 nights. So I think this could be an opportunity for the Twins to score some runs, specifically that top third of the lineup, which, despite them being 20 games below 500, is one of the more potent 1-2-3s in all of baseball. So I like Polanco a lot.
Matt, which bat over 4K are you going with?
I'm going to give 2 because they're basically the same kind of play. So Vlad Guerrero Jr. is the best hitter on this slate, most likely, but the second and third best hitters are probably not getting any attention, and it has to do with the pitchers they're facing. So you have Juan Soto against Luis Castillo, but if Castillo's chalk, then you don't see a lot of Soto ownership. And then the same is true for Shohei Ohtani against Lance McCullers. Those offenses as stacks, I don't think are in great spots. You'd be basically going to them just for leverage against highly owned pitchers. But Soto and Ohtani are good enough that even without that consideration, just playing them because of how great they are, I think that makes sense anyway. So I like both of them over the Toronto guys, mostly just as an ownership consideration, because while I do think the Blue Jays do have the highest upside of any offense tonight, I think everyone knows that. So it's not that I don't want to play them at all. It's just that I want to try to get some more contrarian hitters in there with them. And Soto and Ohtani are the 2 that jump out to me as the very clear options for that.
All right, let's get a hitter under 4K that you want to roster, Garion.
Kyle Farmer is in a really nice spot tonight. He's $3,800. Patrick Corbin, it's crazy to say his season has somehow gotten worse his past 5 starts. You would think that would be impossible, considering how nightmarish it had been before that point. But his last 5 starts, 7.62 ERA a 433 opponent WOBA in that span of time. And Farmer really has done all of his damage in 2021 against left-handed pitching. He's got an 836 OPS and a 238 isolated power against southpaw pitchers. So I think Farmer could be in a really nice spot. And he's someone who actually carries a little bit of upside, despite the fact that you probably didn't even know who he was 2 months ago.
All right, Matt, where are you going?
So I never thought that I would be talking about these kinds of players this season, but there are actually some other Angels hitters that I really like. Part of it is because they're facing McCullers, who I do think will be overly popular. But the Angels are really cheap. And if you want to play guys like Soto, Ohtani, maybe you want to play Vlad too, Bryce Harper, there's a lot of expensive hitters. So if you want to get some savings with some other hitters, you have probably the leadoff hitter for the Angels in Brandon Marsh. And the reason that I like him and some of the other Angels with some speed is that Lance McCullers actually, if there's one thing that he doesn't do well, it's limit walks. He does walk a lot of hitters, and it will allow opportunities for stolen bases. I like Ohtani for that reason, but Marsh is 2,200, probably in the leadoff spot. I think that that's a value play that would be obvious if McCullers wasn't a popular pitcher tonight, but because most lineups are going to have him in them already, I think Marsh goes overlooked. I think all of these Angels go overlooked. So this stack is going to have a hard time scoring 8, 9, or 10 runs, but even if they score 4 or 5, the pricing is good enough that that could still be worth having.
Nick, which hitter under 4K are you rolling with?
Well, I was looking at Farmer like Garion, but I ended up landing on Corey Dickerson at 2.5K. Again, going against Pineda tonight, we're doing a little mini Blue Jay stack here. Of course, he's towards the bottom of the order. And he's another guy that was doing well, obviously not as well as George Springer was, but in a larger sample size, was doing well against right-handed pitching coming into this month. Make sure you check the lineup tonight because I know Dyson played last night, and then Grichuk is splitting time with Dickerson too. So, of course, want to make sure that he's in there before you play him tonight. But he's done well against Pineda. I would expect him to be in there. Again, small sample size, but he's got a couple home runs and 3 doubles against him. So there's opportunity for him to get on base or driving in runs.